Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
This week on the India Story, a close look at the violence in India's northeastern state, Manipur, where weeks of tensions between Kuki tribal groups and the ethnic majority Meitei community has left dozens dead and thousands homeless. Why has violence erupted in the state, and how can peace return?
The violence erupted in Churachandpur. It was not started by the Meiteis. What kind of peaceful rally it was? AK-47 wielding people, Kalashnikov holding people, is it a peaceful rally?
But this hate campaign has come up in the last 4-5 years. And at the helm of all this is the CM himself. And this is the result what we get now.
This week on Inside South Asia, what does Erdogan's win mean for the region, especially for countries like India and Pakistan?
Advanced and strategic aircraft, the F-35 and B-1 bombers, participated for the first time in the annual COPE India air exercises. This all matters because we face a rapidly changing world. We see bullying and coercion from the People's Republic of China, Russian aggression against Ukraine that seeks to redraw borders by force and threatens national sovereignty, as well as transnational challenges such as terrorism and climate change. So democracies must now rally together around not just our common interest, but also our shared values. Preserving and protecting the freedoms that are essential to peace and prosperity will require vigorous leadership from the United States and from India. And so we still have a lot of work to do, but I am confident that the U.S.-India partnership will help secure an open and prosperous future for the Indo-Pacific and the wider world. Again, it's great to be here. And let me thank our Indian hosts for their outstanding hospitality. And I look forward to working with them to build the next phase of the U.S.-India defense partnership. So thanks very much, and I'll be glad to take a couple of questions.
Good afternoon, Secretary, and thank you for doing this interaction.
Hello, you're with me, Katie Pilgrim, now from London. Well, as you were hearing just then, that was the US Defence Secretary speaking live in India, Lloyd Austin there, who was meeting the Defence Minister here in New Delhi. This is all in a bid to bolster security relationships between the two countries. Let's now get to today's headlines for you. After the massive rail accident that killed 275 people in India, the Railway Ministry seeks a probe by the Central Bureau of Investigation 51 hours after the tragedy unfolded. Movement resumes at the crash site. Nearly 80 Afghan girls are hospitalized after being allegedly poisoned in the province of Saripur in the north, claiming official authorities say initial probes show that someone with a grudge paid a third party to carry out the attacks. Russia's military claims it has repelled a large-scale offensive by Ukraine in Moscow-annexed Donetsk, as an official reported an alarming attack in a southern region housing Europe's largest nuclear plant. Saudi Arabia sent shockwaves through oil markets to voluntarily cut oil production by 1 million barrels per day. Well, analysts warn that oil prices could touch $100 per barrel in 2023. Okay, let's now get back to Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Minister, who is here in the country in New Delhi, speaking about the relationships between the US and India.
It's incumbent upon the Ukrainians to find those points of advantage where they can leverage and exploit. So we'll see what happens. Again, our goal was to make sure that we provided them with the training, the platforms, the capability to be able to successfully breach and maneuver. So.
Thanks, sir. Next question will go to Asia News International. Ajit.
Sir, I'm Ajit Dubey from ANI. Thank you very much. Sir, you just talked about the bullying and coercion by the Chinese. Now, India and China have been in a military standoff for the last 3 years due to Chinese aggression on the eastern Ladakh sector. Looking at their deployments, sir, do you think there can be more such misadventures since they have not taken back any deployment from there on the Indian borders? And how do you see the Chinese defense minister's statement that NATO-like alliances in the Asia-Pacific can be very dangerous for the region?
Yeah, so let me just make sure I got your question right. The first part of the question was whether or not I anticipate that there'll be more misadventures. And then the second question is regarding China's view of our effort to, their perception of our effort to establish a NATO-like alliance in this region. I'll take the last piece first. And you may have heard me say in Singapore the other day that, we are absolutely not trying to establish a NATO in the Indo-Pacific. We continue to work with like-minded countries to ensure that the region remains free and open so that commerce can prosper and ideas can continue to be exchanged. And so we will continue that work. And so certainly India and us share the same vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. In terms of what could happen along the LAC, I won't get into any kind of speculation, but, a number of things can always happen, but want to make sure that we do everything we can to ensure that things don't happen. And part of that is being able to communicate with great powers, being able to communicate with each other and prevent things from incidents from escalating out of control. So I won't care to speculate as to whether or not there'll be additional misadventure, but I certainly hope not. So.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will go
close question, then I have one about India. Have the Ukrainians notified?
That's two questions, Nancy.
But only two, hopefully. Have the Ukrainians notified the U.S. of the start or the imminent start of their offensive? And if not, based on your military experience, what are we seeing happen? Intelligence with India during its border clashes with China. What other specific steps is the U.S. taking to ensure that India is capable of pushing against China's?
In terms of where the Ukrainians are in their planning and execution of their operation, again, I really would defer to the Ukrainians to answer that. Well, we can talk about what we're seeing, and we're seeing continued operations in and around the Bakhmut area. We're seeing an uptick in activity south of there, and you mentioned the next region, I think, and so there could be a number of things happening as the weather improves. We said before that weather has been a factor here throughout. Then Ukraine will want to make sure that it's doing the right things to conduct battlefield reconnaissance and all those things that could lead up to a successful maneuver. But what exactly they're doing, where, when, and how, I think the right thing to do is to allow the Ukrainians to speak to their operation. And your second question was, again?
The U.S. has reportedly shared intelligence with India during its border clashes with China. What other specific steps is the U.S. taking to ensure that India is capable of pushing against Chinese military assertiveness?
Well, I won't talk about what we share and don't share with our partners or allies, but as you know, as a practice for our allies and partners, we always share as much information as we possibly can, and again, any specific steps that we may or may not take, again, I won't care to address that in this forum. So.
Our next question will go to The Economist.
For allies to do more together. How far do you think the U.S. partners will create a more integrated defense industrial base, and what benefits does that bring to the U.S.?
And we're still very careful about guarding our technology, and we only share our technology with countries that we absolutely believe in and trust, and so you see an increasing desire for us to share with our partners here in India. And I think that if you look at some of the things that we're working on, Antoine, it's I would describe this period as certainly consequential in terms of the kinds of things that we're doing, working together on. But I would also say it's transformative in that, again, there are opportunities to increase capacity, increase capability, and all of that is good as you look at what it takes to ensure that we continue to work towards a free and open Indo-Pacific. And again, we share that vision with India and with many other countries in the region as well. And you heard me talk about a lot of that on Saturday when I spoke at Singapore. So we remain encouraged that India has continued to diversify its equipment over the past decade, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with them to increase additional capabilities.
Next question will go to Bloomberg. Peter.
Yeah, thanks very much for doing this. Agree with that assessment, and what are the main obstacles to fulfilling the potential of that partnership when it comes to military cooperation? And then just related to that, if I may, thank you.
So the first piece is it accurate to say that the U.S.-India relationship is one of the most consequential in this century? Absolutely. These are the two world's largest democracies working together toward a common vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Tremendous capacity in this country, and again, like-minded countries working together I think can create lasting effects. And the effects that we're after is what we've hammered home over and over again, is just to make sure that the region remains open and secure and promotes commerce and the free flowing of ideas and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it is a very, very important relationship. So.
Thank you. The obstacles and then the Russian weapons piece.
The obstacles to...
What are the obstacles to the military potential of that relationship being built?
Well, you know, I think there are actually more upsides than obstacles, and we'll focus on all the benefits that we will potentially achieve. And again, you can probably come up with 1,000 different obstacles for any problem set, but there's so much opportunity here. I think it's best to remain focused on what we can do with our partners here and really create goodness for the region and goodness for our both of our industrial bases and our militaries.
Last question will go to ABC Matt.
Thank you, Secretary Austin. Last month. At this point, do you know whether these were indeed U.S. vehicles, and further, whether they came to Ukraine as part of any U.S. aid packages? Secondly, going off of that, does the U.S. do any tracking of weapons and vehicles beyond the sort of end-use tracking to make sure it gets to where it's supposed to go in Ukraine, stay within settled boundaries?
Well, Matt, you've heard us say a number of times that we've emphasized to our partners there in Ukraine that, you know, the use of our equipment for offensive operations in Russia, we certainly would discourage that. And in terms of our ability to track end-use monitoring, you know, we continue to progress in terms of capability. The limitation has been from the very beginning the number of people we actually have on the ground there in Ukraine. Now, having said that, I think the Ukrainians have been, by and large, really transparent in allowing us to access those areas we need to access and look at what we need to look at. So we will certainly maintain the stance that the equipment that we provide is for use in their defense of their sovereign territory. And again, we'll continue to refine our end-use monitoring capabilities as well. But I think we have come a ways, but it will never be perfect until you can get a lot of people on the ground.
And in that particular instance in Belgorod, do you have any updates on that?
No, I don't have any updates for you, Matt. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our press briefing. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin there meeting the Indian Defense Minister in New Delhi in a bid to bolster security between the two countries, touching on a lot of points there, the influence of China, speaking about the Ukraine, and also opportunities. Well, for more on these points, Siddhant Sibal has been listening in and joining us from there. Siddhant, just take us through some of those key points that they were talking about.
Well, one of the key focus areas during his press conference was on China, and China remains a worrisome factor for India and other countries in the region. The US Defense Secretary pointed to the coercion by the Chinese in the region, bullying by the Chinese, and he's coming from Singapore, where he, of course, attended the Shangri-La dialogue, and we saw the statement by the Chinese defense minister, not very positive statement which reeked of how China is perhaps keen on more bullying in the region. But essentially today, both sides, the Indian defense minister and the American Secretary of Defense, held conversations, and we saw one of the key focus areas was on Indo-Pacific, and both sides reaffirming free and open Indo-Pacific in a message to Beijing. But there were other aspects of conversations, including, of course, Pakistan, which the Indian side said is not trustworthy when it comes to the Western defense equipments, and that could destabilize the region. Other, of course, remained the issue of the GE deal, of course, manufacturing of jet engines in India. And it now looks, given that during the Indian Prime Minister's visit later this month to Washington, that will be announced. So all in all, both sides keen on making sure that relationship is more firmed up and there is more defense engagement in next couple of months and years.
Okay, tell us more about what was said about Ukraine.
Well, on Ukraine, the usual stance by the American side was put as the audience, of course, during the press conference. But what is interesting about these comments which were made by the U.S. Defense Secretary is that they are made here in New Delhi. We know that India has a strong relationship with Russia, and the Russians still contribute majorly to the Indian defense industry. And India, of course, is largely diversifying, and the Americans are more than eager to aid India. So essentially, while the comments were similar as he has said in the past, and of course slamming Russia as well, but they were slammed from India is something that will be taken note of. And remember, this was a standalone press conference by the US Defense Secretary, and not a joint press statement or press conference with the Indian side. There hasn't been any such statement, press statement, during a very short, brief visit to New Delhi.
Okay, so thank you so much for covering so much ground for the live press conference. US and India and their relationship, and covering a lot of points for us there with China's influence, the situation in Ukraine, and also what he called the goodness as well between the region. Thank you so much. That's Sid Sybil for us here on WION. We're going to talk about Prince Harry now, because he is set to make an appearance in a London court today in his case against the publisher of the Mirror Group newspapers. So this will make the Duke of Sussex the first senior British royal to give evidence in a court in 130. Well, Harry is taking legal Mirror Group newspapers, where he alleges that took place and other unlawful behaviour as well. Now, the event Prince Harry is referring to, this dates back to 1991 to 2011. And the lawyers representing Harry and 3 other high-profile figures will attempt to prove later today that unlawful information gathering was carried out with the knowledge and approval of senior editors and executives. Well, Prince Harry is one of more than 100 other high-profile figures suing Mirror Group newspapers. Now, in the early days of the trial, the newspaper group already apologised for one of the incidents. The MGN Group accepted that one of its newspapers, the Sunday People, unlawfully sought information about Harry, while also accepting the compensation the British Royal is entitled to. However, it has rejected Harry's other allegations, and it says the Royal has no evidence for his claims. Well, the trial may also see a face-off between Prince Harry and officials from Buckingham Palace. As the newspaper giant argues, some information has come from royal sources. Well, since his exit from the royal family, Prince Harry is engaged in several legal battles with the British press. In a Netflix docu-series, Harry has also accused his family members of making a backdoor deal with the newspapers. Press from all sides from within his party. The UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is going back to the issue that had earlier given a spike in his popularity, I should say, but we are talking about popularity and the population because, of course, it's this immigration issue. Now, this is to underline that he is expected to travel to Dover. Now, this is the port town that's the first point of entry for migrants arriving on boats from Europe. Now, in his address, Sunak is expected to point to the progress made in the 6 months since the introduction of the illegal migration bill, as well as focus again on the importance of the Rwanda plan, where illegal migrants coming to the UK can be transported to a third country. Now, this week, the migration bill will face the House of Lords, where it is expected to face opposition from Labour and Liberal Democrats. Now, earlier, Sunak faced a backlash from his own party members, as Tory MPs accused him of abandoning control of the UK borders. Well, net migration and the backlog of asylum claims reached record highs in the UK. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says this can encourage more people to come to the country through illegal routes. Now, meanwhile, a report from a committee of the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly warns UK ministers that the new migration law could breach rules. And the European report says confusing immigration with criminality can affect some of the most vulnerable people in society. The report also criticises the UK government's plans to ban trafficking victims from the UK on grounds that they are a threat to public order.
Downing Street. Yeah. Did you see? Yeah, we had amazing.
Okay, that's all we've got time for. I'm Katie Pilbeam. I've been broadcasting from the British capital this hour. Thank you for joining me here in London. Stay with WION. More international headlines coming up shortly.
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a nightmare.
Because it does not suit their propaganda, or because they are too scared to speak truth to power.
From the second launch pad at Satish Dhawan Space Center, today's launch will be the 4th launch of ISRO this year. 2, 1...